Hello Internet, and welcome to the Collective Arcana. We're a channel all about tabletop gaming, and you may have missed this. We've been gone a little while, but I got a haircut so that you can tell time has passed. We do apologize. We'll be a little bit more active now after the holidays. We've got some big plans, a lot of fun stuff coming up for Pathfinder in particular, and of course a lot of fun miniatures and things like that that I always like to cover as well. Today we're actually going to be talking a little bit about just a kind of a wide overview of some of the stuff that's coming up in the coming months for my game of choice, Pathfinder 2nd edition. It's January, mid-January as we're making this video. Hopefully we'll be posting it well before the end of the month. Just really depends on the schedule of my wonderful wife and pro editor, Sarah, who's in a lot of these videos as well. So I want to start with the one that's coming out this month, and that is Gods and Magic. So the Gods and Magic book is a predominantly lore specific to Golarion. That's the default campaign setting in Pathfinder. And it's a great setting. I'm a home brewer, so I don't have a lot of use for the most of the Lost Omens and things like that. If you like to have a world pre-built for you, whether you aren't confident in your building skills or just don't have the time to create and manage an existing breathing world, the folks over at Paizo have done a wonderful job of doing that for you. It's a terrific world, and their campaign settings and their adventure paths are, again, I've not run a lot of adventure paths being a home brewer, but I've heard that they are pretty much the best in the business. If you have experience with a lot of adventure paths and you want to weigh in on how they rank, please, down in the bottom of the comments, be sure to tell me how wrong or right I am. Thank you. So Gods and Magic is a book, again, set primarily within the lore, and that's going to be its, I think its main draw for most people. It's going to give you a lot of information on the core 20 deities, as well as 20 sort of secondary, not necessarily less powerful, but certainly less prominent in the default setting deities. The complete list of those 20 deities is sort of not really publicly available. They want you to buy the book, understandably. The core 20 are, of course, already in the player's handbook, which I actually have loaned out right now, or I would wave it up to you as an example. But in addition to those 20 core, which go deep dive, at least my understanding is about 2 pages each for the core 20, and then the secondary 20 getting 1 page each. So 2 pages each for the core and 1 page each for the secondary. And then if the various videos and interviews and stuff they've posted are correct, which I don't know why they wouldn't be, at least 100, maybe more, sort of ancillary deities. Their count last I heard was in the 700 plus for a number of deities or godlike entities introduced in the lore, which is a lot, but certainly most of them are niche and apply only to given campaigns or adventures and things like that. But those 100, while not getting the full multi-page treatment, will provide you with lists of preferred weapons, anathema, domains, things like that, so that if you wanted to build a paladin or a cleric devoted to those deities, you could. One thing that I do think is super fun, a lot of you may be wondering, well, 20 is a weirdly round number for them to do 20 core and then 20 secondary. Why 20? Well, according to a recent interview with some of the developers, that's a pretty great reason. It's because they wanted you to have at least 2 deities of choice for each alignment in the core rulebook. And so that's why they picked the number 20, which is a great reason to pick what seemed like a pretty random number. What if you're not at all interested in that campaign setting or running those gods? Well, I mean, any home brewer will tell you, you just slap a new skin and a new name on any of those gods and you've got a wonderful god for your homebrew world. But more than that, they're adding 18 new domains, and so domains are the special special little schools of focus spells that clerics gain access to. So 18 more of those can really add some variation to your cleric's repertoire. There's also going to be a few pages of non-specific divine or spells not specific to the divine list, some actual divine spells beyond those domain focus spells, but also some other spells for all the traditions. I'm sure mostly themed around deities and things, which there's certainly room for in the occult and the arcane and the primal. In addition, they're going to have at least one new background that is sort of a catch-all, raised by religion sort of background that any character can use, not just characters that plan to take a divine path as a crusader or a cleric, which is pretty cool that you can get a little bit of that deity influence on any character with that background. And they're also going to introduce some feats that anyone can take, some specific to other classes, and some just sort of general. I'm sure some will be skill feats and things as well, so that you can further add that divine flavor to the non-traditionally divine classes. This is something that's super cool if you plan to run a game that will focus a lot on things like, like gods at war or things like that, especially transition periods, big cataclysmic events. It's really neat. And there's also, I believe, going to be some rules for things like temporary minor boons that a deity might give. One of the developers said specifically something like, if you find a shrine lost in the woods and you clean it up and get it presentable again, you might get randomly a boon from the god that the shrine is to, which is really cool and a great way to incorporate, even if you don't intend, like I said, to use these specific deities in your world. Great, wonderful ways to incorporate what your deities, whatever those are, in a way that makes the world feel real, makes it feel lived in, and can make the players that much more invested in their deity or, just the lore of the world. So that is Gods and Magic, and that's releasing this month. That's January 2020. And that's a cat. Next up is a book that I am super excited about, and that's the Game Master Guide, and that comes out in February, and it cannot come soon enough. So I'm an experienced game master. I like to think I'm pretty good, so it might seem strange that I'm so excited about something that ostensibly seems like it's to teach me how to run a game, but it's promising a whole lot more than that. So the core rulebook comes with a bit of information and instructions on how to run the game, certainly enough to get started, especially if you're a veteran game master. But the thing that the Game Mastery Guide is going to bring to the table is some guides and groundwork on homebrewing and creating your own deities and monsters and things like that. It's also going to bring to bear some variant rules, which as a homebrewer I am super excited about. Again, I do make my own variant rules, but anytime I can get an official look under the hood of a system and see how the actual developers recommend you tweak with it and change it, a little bit can go a long way for a home brewer in terms of figuring out the best way to do weird things even beyond the variant rules presented in the book. So let's just do a quick rundown what we know is coming in this book. It's quite a lot. So of course there's the rules, advice, and guidelines for homebrewing a campaign setting, gods, characters, things like that. The variant rules will include some things that I'm really excited about. Variant proficiency bonus, for those of you who feel like the proficiency bonuses can climb pretty high with the way you're adding your level to them. This is going to give you some guides for altering that and maybe even removing level from the equation completely, and teach you or guide you on how you might need to adjust other aspects of the game. It's also going to include some alternate rules on how your player characters advance with feats, and perhaps most interesting for a lot of people is it's going to have rules for Gestalt characters. If you're not familiar, those are characters that advance in more than one class at the same time. That's going to be pretty interesting, I think, given the way that multiclassing works in 2nd edition. You can already sort of make Gestalt characters with the core rulebook. So how they're going to implement that is pretty exciting to see. In addition to lots of new magic items, those would include cursed items, intelligent items, and artifacts, as well as the new relics, which is something that I've used in my games quite a bit for years and years, are these special items tied to your character that will grow as your character progresses. It's a really fun concept. It's a great way to get characters invested in either the patron that gave them that weapon or just in their character's journey as that weapon grows with them, like a measurable reflection of their power. It's a really fun thing. It's also going to include subsystems for specific types of scenes or scenarios. Those would include like researching, either like investigating a case or solving a mystery, as well as chase scenes and vehicle combat, which, as somebody who's one of my games features pirates and their ship, I'm very excited to see what second edition recommends, how they recommend you play that. It's going to have, I sort of mentioned already, monster creation rules. Now the cool thing about the monster creation rules is they're already available for free to download. We'll try to get a link and put that down in the description. You can get them right off Pathfinder's website. Once they launched second edition, one of the first things they did was acknowledge that they want to release those rules to people well before the release of the actual Game Master Guide. As far as I know, the intention is that they will be unchanged from those rules in the new book, but it's still nice to have them all in one place and in a nice physical thing that you can hold, as opposed to a PDF, which are convenient but just don't have that same old school feel that I am into. In addition to the monster creation rules, they are going to have another thing that's going to make a DM's life a lot easier, or a GM's life, I should say, a lot easier, and that is NPCs. Pre-generated 60 total NPCs, but a lot more because they're all defaulted to human, and then you can apply various archetypes over them, or not archetypes, but templates over them to turn them into all the different ancestries in the core book. So, and you know, the ancestries from the Lost Omens character guide, and that we'll release later. So they're all thematic, so you'll have a few like surgeon, mundane doctor type characters all in one spot. You'll have, butchers and things like that. And the really cool thing about that, a lot of you might be saying, and I sort of did too, is, well, these are, things that you can already create. Who needs stats for a butcher? He's a human, goes about his day, right? What's cool is they are allowing for these NPCs to be experts, to be trained beyond their level in certain aspects of gameplay. So, for example, if you, for whatever reason, need to have a chili cook-off in your game, you can have an NPC who, while he may only be level 2 to your player characters and their level 8, level 10 characters, he can still challenge them in one fashion, and that's on the that's in the kitchen. This is a pretty weird, fun thing that is going to make for a lot of great non-combat encounters. And the templates for it, again, as a home brewer, I'm really excited to see exactly how they structure that. And is it just going to be the simple, just make this number bigger, or do they have more in mind? So great inspiration there, even for a home brewer. And that is the Game Mastery Guide. It comes out next month. Those variant rules have me just antsy as hell. I cannot wait to get my hands on it and see what's in there. So, there's books releasing in March, and there's some other things. I'm going to go back at the end of the video and give you some miscellaneous things I might recommend you look into, especially as new players and new people running the game. But I'm going to skip over to April. That's the next book that I'm particularly excited about, and that is the Bestiary 2. Now, Bestiary 1 came with, I believe, about 400-ish monsters, and most of the classics are in there. You've got your trolls, your ogres, various giants and dragons, and all sorts of undead and other strange creatures, which is honestly all you'll ever need, but it's not all you'll ever want. And so the Bestiary 2 is going to come, and it's going to give us a lot of weird stuff. It's going to include some classics, but it's also going to add some fan favorites. So you're going to have things like Jabberwockies and things like that, sort of classic mythological creatures. But you're also going to have fan favorites from first edition, like the primordial dragons and things like that. And you're going to have some new things, which they've kept pretty close to the vest so far. But with 350 monsters, that's a lot of pages to fill. And it's pretty exciting to have some more creatures. I've only been playing for a couple of months in second edition, and I am definitely still, I haven't gotten nearly through that Bestiary 1 yet, but I'm still chomping at the bit to see what more they can give us. In addition to just rules for individual monsters, there's also going to be some universal monster rules where they're going to sort of streamline and give simple, all-inclusive rules to special attacks, grab, swallow whole, regeneration, things like that. So, not a whole lot to dive into yet on that Bestiary 2. I'm sure as we get going and get closer to April, I'm sure a lot more will start coming out of it. But I mean, the art and the extra monsters alone are going to be super fun. And in July, we are getting the big one. This one is what I would say the average person would be most excited about. But I could be wrong. Please, down below, let me know what you're most excited for. But the Advanced Player's Guide is coming out in July 2020, and that feels like forever away. It's only a few months now, but it's gonna be jam-packed with player character options. Even though I don't get to play much myself, I still love being able to give my players as many tools as possible so that they can create just the weirdest, most specific characters that they can. So let's just dive into what we're going to get. We're going to get some new ancestries. We're going to get catfolk, which are exactly what they sound like. If you've played Skyrim or things like that, that's going to be the Khajiit. If you play D&D 5e, you'll know them as Tabaxi, but they're catfolk. It's also going to have kobolds, another little small race to go beside the goblins and the halflings. And kobolds are a classic little creature. There will be variations for the different bloodlines based on the chromatic dragons that they could stem from. And I'm excited to see what they do with that and how crazy they can make those little critters. Going pretty much the opposite of kobolds, we have orcs, which are big and brutish. One thing that has changed a lot in the last 20 years or so about orcs is orcs used to be sort of squat, strong, but sort of squat. Pathfinder really leans into those just big World of War or Warcraft style, bulky, gigantic mounds of muscle orcs, and I really like that design as well. So we're gonna see what they plan. We got a little taste in the core rule book with the half-orc heritage and the human ancestry. So we'll see how they pad that out and what else we can expect from the orcs. It's going to be a very popular one, I'm sure. And next we have the rat folk, which can seem like an odd choice maybe. I really like it. Again, it's a sort of diminutive race or ancestry that a lot of people might overlook or not think much of, and that's great for your rogues and your sneaks and things like that want to be underestimated. And then we're going to have the Tengu, which are also a little bit small. You may know them as Kinku from 5th edition D&D. The name Tengu is pretty a nice little allusion to Japanese folklore, which is where they're based, and they're little raven people. And they are a pretty cool, traditionally very magic focused, a bit reclusive. We'll see exactly what they do with them in Pathfinder 2nd edition. I'm pretty excited. I love the designs that we've already seen for them, and yeah, pretty excited to see that. Beyond those base ancestries, we also have heritages. Now, we've seen heritages before in that most of the races in the core rulebook have, most of the ancestries in the core rulebook have these little ancestries and things that are heritages that go beyond that. So you might not just be an elf, you might be a snow elf. You might not just be a human, you might be a half-orc, things like that. Now, one thing that is different about these heritages is they are not specific to an ancestry. And they sort of mention in the core rulebook that the half-orc and half-elf could be applied to other ancestries as well, but this is the first time they're really diving into that concept, so expect to see even a little bit more sort of variation and things like that here. So let's go ahead and get to the list. These are some returning favorites in here, starting with the Aasimar, which are the angelic sort of progeny. So if you have a character that has angelic blood, or maybe through some ritual or another has had some divine essence put into them, you may want to play an Aasimar. And again, the way the heritages work, it's really cool because you can be an elven Aasimar, you can be a gnomish Aasimar, you can be I'm looking at you, Anthony. You could be a lizard folk Aasimar. So a lot of really cool things with the way that these heritages work. And Aasimar, that angelic subspecies sort of thing, is a really cool touch. Next we have changelings, another one that is relevant to my game. Now, Pathfinder changelings are traditionally Fae. You're descended from Fae. And you traditionally would get like claws and some minor arcane powers. Now, the changelings in my homebrew world are much closer to the Eberron changelings, where they can actually change their physical form to match whatever they choose. I've heard that there might be something like that as one of the feat tree options within, which is very cool. It'd be nice to get some official support for that. If nothing else, even though I've already got the homebrew, just for additional ideas for my player my wife, who is playing a changeling. The next is Dhampir, which sounds like a strange word if you're not familiar, but is functionally half vampires. If you're not sure what that looks like, I would direct you to the excellent film series starring Wesley Snipes, Blade, as well as quite a few other things in pop culture history where you have a character who is a daywalker or otherwise has the benefits of vampirism without some of the drawbacks. Morbius the Living Vampire will be coming to a theater near you soon, and we'll see how that goes. But again, along those lines, a character who is tainted with the curse but is not technically undead. So that's going to, I'm sure, have some really great, traditionally those are specialized to fighting their monstrous kin, but I'm sure they're going to have a lot of other occult sort of feels to them, which is super fun. Next we have Duskwalkers, which is something I never really learned much about in first edition, but it's the concept of creatures from the plane of shadow, and in my homebrew world that's going to be a very useful heritage for my world. I'm sure I'm going to get some use out of it, at least on my NPCs. Just that concept of the plane of shadow bleeding over and tainting the prime material is a very fun concept to me, and I'm surprised I missed them in first edition. Too much homebrewing can sometimes cause you to miss some really cool things. And then finally we have Aasimars, so of course we're going to have tieflings. And those are your demons, or your demon offspring. Again, as before, as with all of these last few, they do not have to be human, which is a big change from previous editions and the illustrious competition over at Wizards of the Coast. And that's very cool. The idea that you can have orcish tieflings is a big thing, especially in my world. And tieflings in general are just a really popular, really fun ancestry, and one that you don't have to be evil to be a tiefling. I mean, look at Hellboy. Hellboy is a great example, and my wife's witch character is another great example. She's a spooky witch lady with horns and sharp teeth, but she is definitely not a bad guy. So that's going to be your options for your ancestries and heritages, which again, the fact that those heritages can apply to any of the previous ancestries as well as the new ones means that your options for what type of creature your character is have just exploded. It's very cool. It's a big deal. So next up are the 4 new classes. I would urge you, if you're at all interested in these, to check out our video on where we sort of reviewed the Advanced Player's Guide playtest, because all 4 of these classes were released in a playtest form back in, I want to say October or November. It's been a while now. And the cool thing is that those are still completely available. Now, in the Advanced Player's Guide, when it actually comes out, things are going to be tweaked and changed around based on the community feedback, which is a really cool thing. So things will change, and a lot will be added to it. Most of these classes were presented in a pretty bare bones form just to basically test the theory and concepts on some of these characters, because they do have some unique ideas to them. From the Swashbuckler's Panache, the Witch's Patron mechanic, the Oracle's well, what about the Oracle? The Oracle's curses and things like that. And then the Investigator, which brings a whole new sort of aspect to every mode of play in its investigation focus. So if you're at all interested in those characters, definitely check that out. You can absolutely play those characters from 1 to 20 in your campaign. Just be ready for some things to change, most likely for the better, come July when the actual book launches. In addition to the 4 new classes, there's going to be 40, that's 40 archetypes added. To those of you that don't know, archetypes are a great way to customize a character. They can be multi-class archetypes, including the core 12 from the core rulebook, or the 4 new classes introduced in this book will also have archetypes each. But the other 36 archetypes and several other archetypes that have been introduced since then are all sort of universal, almost like prestige classes from previous editions of the game. Things where you might have to qualify for them either through in-game events or the way that you've built your character. And then they give you sort of subclass type options within your class. So we'll just use some of the examples here. We know that we're getting the Cavalier and the Dragon Disciple and the Shadow Dancer and the Vigilante. So the Cavalier and the Vigilante were separate classes in first edition Pathfinder, and the Shadow Dancer and Dragon Disciple were archetypes. So that'll give you an idea of what these can do. So the archetypes before were just modifications to a base class, and that's still something that you can do. But the Cavalier option, for example, means that any character that you want to get extra benefit from riding a mount can do that. You can have a Cavalier Wizard, you can have a Cavalier Fighter, which is more traditional, or Champion. And then maybe your Ranger would like to get some extra benefits for riding his animal companion, that big bear, for example. I don't know for sure that it's going to support bears. As a home brewer, I'll say, why wouldn't it support bears? But we'll see what the official book says. And then things like the Vigilante, I really like that idea because the Vigilante as a class in first edition already had a subclass and archetype to pretty much replicate every other class. It started with Fighter and Rogue, and then it really went on to cover all the myriad bases so that it could feel like your Vigilante, when they were in their Vigilante form, could replicate one of the other classes. Certainly not completely, but close enough that no one in lore in the world would be like, that guy doesn't seem like a wizard. So the fact that you can have this Vigilante archetype to just apply to any other class is very cool. And for those that don't know, the Vigilante is just an alter ego where you get some social skills, but you also get like the ability to hide your secret identity and change quickly in and out of your 2 very separate personas. It's a niche thing. It's something that won't fit into every campaign, but I've always wanted to have a vigilante in my game. It's very cool in concept. Who doesn't want to have a Batman around? Finally, there will be a lot of new class options for the Core 12. This would include the Zen Archer Monk, as well as, I hear, Drunken Master, which is always a popular choice. Drunken Master is, at least one of my friends, it's his favorite way to play a monk. There's also the Mastermind racket for rogues. Rogues in the core book have the Scoundrel, which is charisma based, the Thug, which is strength based, and the Thief, which is dexterity based. So we're going to get at least one more of those rackets or rogue subclasses in the form of the Mastermind Rogue. It's probably going to be intelligence based. It's probably going to take some cues from the Investigator. They can be fairly similar classes, but I'm sure they'll make it its own somehow. Otherwise, you would just multi-class as an investigator on your rogue. And there's also going to be magical options for the Ranger, which is pretty cool. I'm imagining it's going to be one of the new Hunter's Edge type features of that class. It seems like it's only going to be focus spells, which might be a bit of a bummer, but it's still really cool and probably going to be a pretty unique feel to that class. So I'm excited for it. And that's just the ones we know about. We certainly know that there's going to be all sorts of other options. I would expect to see some of the features from the new classes, like I would expect to see some investigation options for a lot of the classes, or at least the most appropriate ones. I would also expect to see some of the swashbuckler features pop over on the fighter and vice versa. They pretty much said in the final version of the swashbuckler it's going to have some of those one-handed fighter feats. And then beyond that, there's going to be new general feats, new general backgrounds, spells, rituals, items and potions. So lots and lots to be excited for if you're a player. The Advanced Player's Guide, again, coming out July 2020. I'm super excited about it. And that's pretty much for the next 6 months. Those are all at least for me, the big heavy hitters. If you're excited for something else, definitely let us know down in the comments. One thing before we sign off, I do want to mention the other things that are pretty exciting and might be something that you would want to look into. The first and foremost is there's going to be a whole lot of great maps and things like that, map sets. If you play, and you don't feel like drawing maps, beautiful art in those. It's just wonderful. The other thing that I'm very, very excited for are the new Pathfinder pawns that are going to come out. I've mostly switched over to painted miniatures. It's a great second hobby within the hobby that my wife and I enjoy a whole lot. All the fun different creatures that you can do, including from strange sources and 3D printing. But when I first was getting back into the game after about a year or two off after a move, I started looking into these, and Pathfinder makes them. They were in the beginner box for first edition. I'm sure when we get a beginner box for second edition, they'll be in there as well. But they are these wonderful little 2D tokens that work on a battle map, just like this, just like a 3D mini would, but they're significantly cheaper. The next box the box that's coming out this month is the entirety of the Bestiary 1. That is about 400 monsters, but you're going to get doubles of some of them as well. So you're going to get a huge variety of little creatures, enough to populate any sort of adventure that you need. And so those are really good. What you can do if you're just starting out and you don't have a huge collection of miniatures, don't want to invest loads and loads of money, you can spend about $30 or $40, get that Bestiary box, get tokens for every monster in the game, and then just spend a few dollars, get either pre-painted or unpainted tokens for your players, or wait until some of the other pawn boxes are going to come out. There's going to be some for NPCs, some for the specific adventure paths that are releasing. So you can get your party and NPCs covered and have plenty of monsters to fight so that you can enjoy the fun of grid gaming with some really unique and exciting on the table sort of looks versus just using pawns or something like that, and on the cheap. So if you're new to the hobby, please check that out. That's very, very cool, and it's one of the best values in terms of trying to get into the game, the physical part of the hobby. So definitely look for those pawn boxes. All right. So that's pretty much everything that I think you should be on the lookout for in the next few months from Paizo and the Pathfinder 2nd edition. We're going to do some more videos on Pathfinder coming up. Our crew is really enjoying the transition. I have players that are sending me new characters that they want to play every couple of days because of great apps like Path Builder 2E, which you should definitely check out if you have an Android device. And we're just super stoked about it. So we're going to kind of focus the channel on that a little bit. If there's anything else you'd like to see or anything specific about Pathfinder 2nd edition, do please let us know. We're always growing, but that just means that we have plenty of room to make the content that you're looking for most. So expect some deep dives and expect some home brewing videos coming up soon, as I try to teach you how I was able to jam some really strange things into 2nd edition so far. Thanks so much for joining us. I know it was a long one. We really appreciate you sticking it out. And welcome to the collective. Bye.